Hey, welcome back to the program. Show's called Your Money or Wealth. My name's Joe Anderson. I'm a certified financial planner, of course, with Alan Clopine. Thanks for tuning in here until 11:30 on your Channel 4 cable station. Thanks for tuning in. We're having a lot of fun here talking about a pretty serious topic. When it comes to death, when it comes to disability, are you sure that you have the estate plan in place? Before we went to the break, we had a true-false question. Let's see how you did.
If I want my affairs to remain private after I pass away, I need to set up a living trust versus a will.
Yeah, that answer is, I don't know what the heck that was. That sounded like
I'm not sure if that's
a duck.
That sounds true.
Yeah.
It's generally true, right? So here's the thing, is if you have assets of less than $150,000 in California, it doesn't really matter. You're not going to go to probate. And what probate is just going to the court. So your kids, the executor has to go to court to figure out where the assets are supposed to go to, right? That's what probate is. Assets are less than $150,000, no probate, it's not public. But if you have more than $150,000, it does go to probate, and so it's a matter of public record. So if you don't want to have your affairs public, then you need a living trust. And this is a reason why, Joe, a lot of people do get living trusts, just to remain private.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a couple of different techniques that you could use. You could put your kids on joint title of your property. So any real property that you have, how do you avoid probate in that situation? You can just put junior on title. We recommend that you don't do that because then your kids could get involved in lawsuits and things like that, and then your primary residence or your property is kind of held. I know your kids are perfect angels and nothing will ever happen, but Al and I have been doing this long enough where we've seen issues like that. IRAs, of course, and 401ks, that will never go through the probate process because you have an IRA beneficiary designation. So they will go directly to those people. That trumps any type of estate plan. Al, before we get to this, I want to talk about two different things that I think are really important that we talked a little bit about before the break, is that you need to make sure that you get, if there's anything that you get out of this show, get a financial power of attorney and a healthcare directive. Absolutely critical. It will cost you $150. It is not that expensive, and I'm telling you, you have a 70% chance of something happening to you from a disability, or if you just get knocked out for a couple of hours. It doesn't matter. You want to make sure that you have those documents. Like I said before, a financial power of attorney. Sometimes if you're married, one spouse has a large 401k or an IRA. The other spouse does not have access to that money without a working financial power of attorney. IRAs and 401ks are separate property. You want to make sure that you have a financial power of attorney there. Death is easy when it comes to transferring wealth, but if you're disabled, just for a very short period of time, that's where it gets really ugly. Because then what happens, the spouse needs to go to court to get conservatorship, and when does that spouse need the money? Probably right away. Another thing, when a healthcare directive, all I usually have to say, Al, is that the name Terry Schiavo. I don't know if you guys remember that mess, right? She's in a vegetative state. The husband's like, no, she wants to pull the plug. Her family saying, no, we want to make sure that she's taken care of and everything else. So what happened? It drained the wealth of the family because they didn't take the time just to put some normal documentation. It is so important. So a healthcare power of attorney, financial power of attorney, make sure that you get those drafted as soon as possible. Let's talk about probate a little bit.
Well, we do need to talk about that because probate's actually pretty expensive, or can be. So why don't we go through an example here. If you pass away and have a few assets, and Joe, I know you're going to walk over to the board over here to kind of illustrate, but let's just go over a simple example where you own a home and maybe it's worth around $600,000 or so, and you've got a mortgage on it of $400,000. So maybe you have $200,000 of equity and your retirement accounts are about $200,000. So you have a $400,000 net worth. And that really is not where probate starts. If we go to the next slide, probate actually starts on the gross value of your assets. Which
right.
means,
I mean, this is key because this is the problem. When you take a look at what's going on out here, is that if you got right, so $200,000 is the home equity, but my house is worth $600,000. If you have $1 million home with $1 million note, right? When you look at probate costs, it's not going to be based on what the equity is, it's the gross value, Al.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So in this example, we've got $600,000 home value plus a retirement account of a couple $100,000. So probate is going to be based upon $800,000. And how much do you pay? How much does your estate pay for probate fees? Well, it can be a lot of different figures. We're illustrating 5% because that's a common amount, although it could be all over the board. But that would be about $40,000 that your estate is going to have to pay. Now, if you have a living trust, there is no probate. The assets get distributed in accordance to your trust, and there's no worrying about this court case, the court fees, the attorney fees, and on and on and on.
So a few different things to take a look at in this real quick example is that we looked at, all right, the $600,000 value, you have $200,000 of retirement accounts. Now, if there's no designated beneficiaries on those retirement accounts, those will go through the probate process. It will go to the estate. And so the estate then has to distribute the wealth, and that will do it through probate. If you have a designated beneficiary, check the form, because then that will avoid the probate process. So you can just take this $200,000 right off the equation. So then you're only looking at $600,000. But a lot of you haven't checked the designate or your beneficiary form. All right, so make sure that it's updated. You want to make sure that you have a human being, right? We call it the heartbeat test. All right, if you can fog a mirror, then that's perfect, because they're alive. If they are an entity or it's in a state, that is not a good beneficiary. If you ever have problems thinking of a good beneficiary, Joseph Anderson is a good name. You can just put that on there, and trust me, it will get to the right person. So here's the deal: $800,000 gross estate, and then $400,000 is what you're going to end up paying, or $40,000. That's a huge number. And then guess what? Where's that money going to come from? The kids are either going to have to sell the house, or they're going to have to pull it from the retirement accounts. Al, what's going to happen when they pull that $40,000 from the retirement account?
Yeah, it's a good question, because the kids have to pay taxes on that. So clearly, they're not going to get that $200,000 out. It's going to be something much lower. Now, going on to our next point, and that is, you've done the right thing. You set up the trust, but then you forgot to put the assets in the trust. And what I mean by that is you have to change the title. So if you have a checking account, you have a savings account, you actually have to change the title to the name of your trust. If you have a brokerage account at TD Ameritrade or Schwab, you got to change that account. Or real estate, you have to go down to the county and record it in the name of your trust. Don't worry, this is what we call a see-through entity. So there's no difference in how you can use those assets, but they just have to be titled in the trust for you to avoid probate.
Right. Well, I mean, the whole purpose of setting up a living trust, it's an entity, right? So you don't own the assets anymore. The trust owns the assets. So you want to make sure that that legal entity owns the assets, because then they can distribute. Then you set up a successor trustee. So you are the trustee of your trust. You're the CEO of your corporation, if you will. If you were to pass away, who takes over? The vice president now becomes CEO. And then you already set the bylaws. You tell the CEO that, or the coming in CEO of what you want to have happen. And they distribute the wealth perfectly to your wishes to the kids. Yeah, perfectly. It never works out perfectly. A couple of things that you want to make sure that you look at, especially with your real estate. Biggest mistake Al and I see is that you forget to put your real estate in the trust, all right? So if you refinance, a lot of times the mortgage companies is going to do what? They're going to take the house outside of the trust to refinance. Why? Is because the trust doesn't have a FICO score. You do. So they have to take it out, look at your credit. Okay, here we refinance. And then you have to put it back in the trust. That's one of the biggest mistakes that we see. You spent all this money to put this elaborate estate plan in place, and you die, and guess what? The house is going to go directly through probate, and then you have to pay all these costs. Come into our office. We'll give you a free financial assessment. We'll take a look at everything for you to make sure that you are on track for whatever goal that you're setting out for, but make sure that you don't fall into these traps that a lot of people do. Here's the number, 888-994-6257, 888-994-6257. Call. It's absolutely free of charge. You have nothing to lose here. Now, when we get back from the break, I want to get into a little bit more about what happens to IRAs if you don't set these up correctly when you pass. And then we have your email questions, of course, so we're going to get a hold of those. Do not go anywhere. We got a lot more to go. Show's called Your Money, and it's Your Wealth.